My name is Helen Kirwan. I was born in Dublin, in Ireland, but have spent a lot of my life in the UK, Brussels, in Belgium, and other parts of the world. My practice is, broadly speaking, a conceptual practice using mainly moving image photography and a certain amount of performance. I'm interested in the concept of mourning and loss and trying to find some kind of a visual language to express those rather abstract or very abstract notions. And I'm also interested in journeying as a metaphor for memory and loss. I was invited to take up an artist's residency at the Cyprus Academy of Arts last year. I came to Cyprus at the beginning of January, and because of lockdown actually commenced the residency at the beginning of February. At that point, Cyprus had still quite a strict lockdown policy, which was a fantastic challenge. In a way, it was a good constraint, because it forced me to think of different ways of working. Normally I work a lot outdoors in the field, in remote locations, whereas now, of course, one wasn't allowed out at all. So I started a series of performances which were done in a studio setting, I called it performance art in the virtual. And the idea was to reach a global audience and to do the performances live, which is something I've never done before, or not in that way, I have to say. And for me, working in the more artificial and controlled environment of a studio was different, and in a way, and a challenge. So it was, but I think the performances worked well. I did 7 of them and called the whole series Grief Works. I chose the title Grief Works to express what was going on in my mind, as it were, when I decided to do these performances, which was, as I've said already, to do with reaching out to a global audience, but very much with having in mind the huge amount of sorrow and loss that has been experienced by probably millions of people in the world. And the amount of dislocation and grief is probably still not fully understood. It's a scale beyond, in a way, our imagining. And also one of the elements of the COVID, the pandemic, has been the fact that people have been forbidden to touch each other. So, for example, if people were not allowed to visit elderly relatives in residential situations, they weren't allowed to hug their dying relatives, and so on and so on. So that was one sort of stream of thinking about what these performances were going to be about, and what they were for, in inverted commas. The other thing that I was very aware of is that I think the world has become more reflective. You know, we have lived so much in especially in the West, in sort of late capitalism, in a world of massive consumption and sort of sensory overload. And people have perhaps forgotten or have stopped knowing how to literally be present in any situation. And so I felt, and I may be wrong, but I sensed that there was a reaction against this sort of culture, these kind of elements, and a tendency for people to become more reflective, because not only has our mortality become starkly a concern of all of us, and sadly an experience for many people who have lost loved ones, but also so the fragility of human beings perhaps has become underlined. But on top of that, there's also a fast growing awareness of the fragility of the planet. So it's not just us as kind of individuals at risk, but the whole world, the whole ecosystem, the very planet, whatever that encompasses, is absolutely on a knife edge at the moment. So these kind of concerns, I think, are floating around for all of us, and perhaps causing some people, to become more reflective. So my work tends to be very quiet and slow, and I thought perhaps it might be the performances that I propose to do would offer a kind of quiet space for people to be reflective and to slow down and pay attention to their thoughts and feelings, especially about those who obviously have suffered loss and bereavement. The opportunity to have this residency, in a strange way, during a pandemic, has had the advantage of forcing me to work or to consider working in slightly different ways from the way I normally would. Actually, when I do my performances, normally, in inverted commas, I do them solo without an audience, and they are videoed, and then subsequently the material is edited to create a video installation, maybe 2-3 channel video installation. So for me, not having an live audience was not particularly strange, but one of the issues that's come up, I think, for artists who are working in this way, what I should say is artists who are performance artists with a capital P, which I'm actually not, but for them the live audience is often absolutely crucial, and it's the interaction between the artist, the performance artist, and the live audience that's part of the work. And the immediacy is also, the work lies in the moment, and that's where it sits, and there is to be no documentation, and so on and so on. I mean, obviously there are many issues to be unpacked in this sort of territory, and I've started to do some research into these questions, and I'm now tentatively, I'm just beginning to start putting together some ideas for a research paper, which hopefully will be ready in September. My residency in Cyprus with the Cyprus Academy of Arts has been a very rich and rewarding experience, very much due to the support that I've had from the Academy in terms of materials and facilities. For example, I've been able to use their studio to do my live performances in. They have helped me massively with the technical side in terms of the live streaming and all sorts of logistics as well, getting things in place, all the sort of behind the scenes bits and pieces that have to be done before each performance, the props to be sourced and things like that. I'm quite often asked by non-artists, but also artists, what is the point of a residency? What is a residency? And of course, residencies vary massively across the world according to the institution or the invitees and the invitors to a residency. But essentially, one of the Well, there are probably two really key elements. One is being in a different culture. Many residencies are abroad for artists, but some can even, some are even within your own, people's own countries, and still a different culture. You're going to a different milieu. When one has a residency abroad, for example, my residency here in Cyprus, it's just an immense opportunity to learn as much as one can about the history of Cyprus, the immense richness of its history and culture, its people, its language. Obviously, in this part of Cyprus where I'm in the Greek side, the language is Greek, and I've been trying to learn some Greek, and that's been rewarding as well. The other key element of a residency for any artist, I think, is that it is a designated space. It's a space which you can carve, which is carved out for you, away from your normal everyday practice and life. So there's an intensity of focus available to you, which is not, generally speaking, available in an artist's everyday life. And that is valuable beyond measure for any artist. It's a huge privilege to be able to sit or stand or work in one's studio uninterrupted by the vicissitudes of life. Not to say that they don't intrude ever, but it is having that designated space, that special time, which is so valuable. A residency in Cyprus is an especially rich experience, perhaps, because of its location between three continents, Africa, Asia and Europe. So the diversity of culture and history is just immense. Added to which, the Cyprus Academy of Arts has a strong culture of support for artists. There's a great ethos of kind of freedom of spirit and support, which is very encouraging and kind of affirming in a way, and of great value.